So welcome everyone to the first Regenerate Barichara session, although I would actually call this Barichara update number 27, because we did 26 of them before, although we haven't done any since the last one we did was January 2023, a year and a half ago. But we had a process back then where we were designing a regeneration fund for Barichara at a large scale, the scale of a 500,000 hectare landscape system. And a lot of work has been done in Barichara in the last few years, a lot of work. And so we're revitalizing this, which is part of what I'll talk about today in the presentation. But what I want to do to sort of welcome you all here and set a little context is to say that these Regenerate Barichara sessions are part of a shift that's happening in the design school. But it's a shift that actually just brings the learning journey closer to what the design school has been doing from the beginning, which is from the beginning. The design school started in March of 2023. Kind of amazing. It's such a short time and so much has happened. But what we've been doing is emphasizing that the design school is not online. Online is supports for where the real school is, which is in our landscapes. So when we talk about regenerating the greater Takaranto bioregion, Penny and I fly up to Toronto and hang out with Brian and Susan and go meet people on different farms. And basically, the work is happening in the landscapes. And when we do an activation tour, that's really visible. Like when we go down the Colorado River or throughout Cascadia, working with local organizers, there's this emphasis on what's happening on the ground. But what we've been doing in the learning journey in the last 3 months is creating shared language, offering some shared frameworks or challenges that we all have to solve in all of our landscapes. So we should be learning how to do it together. And the online part of this really helps that happen. But what we're going to be doing in this session is we're going to explore how to build a funding ecosystem for a bioregion in a context where we're actually doing it. And what that means is, even though I'm the presenter today, in this series that will be bi-weekly and ongoing, I'm going to start inviting leaders from Barichara to come and share what they're doing. And you'll get to meet more people from Barichara. And sometimes those people will not speak English and we'll have to translate for them. Although I'll start with, to be gentle and move in to this, I'll start with people who are bilingual that can speak English and share with you. But the idea is to really build a relationship between us in the design school and the people of Barichara. And also to build relationships with the people all over the world who are supporting the work of Barichara. And the idea is that we have found a way, we've found lots of ways to mobilize resources into our bioregion, from global supports with crowdfunding, with donor networks, with grant funding, with all kinds of things. And that we're starting to do that in a new phase and in a new way. And what we're learning in Barichara could be useful to you in your bioregions, because we have a lot of structure that we've created, a lot of tools that we use that we think will be inspiring. So these sessions sort of have a dual focus. One focus is let's practice building something together that helps the work in Barichara, so you can support real world landscape restoration, real community development, real education of children, all kinds of things that are happening in Barichara. And that we can learn together how to use many of the same approaches for the places where you're working. And so we'll start to see this resonance. And for those of you who were involved in Earth Regenerators before, when we were doing this work 3-4 years ago, there was always a little bit of confusion about which part of the work was, quote, Joe's work in Barichara and which part was Earth Regenerators, because we had this really mixed leadership structure that was not confusing at first, but became confusing later. And I think we'll safely avoid that here in the design school, because we have many different bioregions with many different leaders doing things in their own landscapes and organizing their own structures. And so in a way, I'm not the co-founder of the design school today. I'm just a member of the design school who works in a landscape, who works in a bioregion. And I want to share with you what I'm doing and ask you to help me And then I wanted to help you for the places where you're working. And so this is peer-to-peer member-led learning in this space. And so the basic format that I have for today is I'm going to give a little presentation with some slides. I'm going to close my slides for a little bit and go into Google Earth and orient you to our territory. And then I'm going to go back into the slides again. And the idea of the presentation is to show you the design challenge that I'm working on and ask for your help. I want you to help me build funding supports for Barichara. And then afterwards, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about, well, how do we want to do this? What do you want to learn? What do you want to be a part of? What would you like to help make happen? Would you like to create a direct learning exchange with your bioregion? So you might do something like, for those of you who don't know, the reason Brian Poop is on this call is because Brian and his partner Susan at the Legacy Project were following me on Twitter, and they donated money for us to pay a teacher to work with kids in Barichara because they loved what we were doing, but also to create a learning exchange with teachers in the greater Takaranto bioregion. They were already envisioning a learning exchange, and boy, have we gone a long way with that, haven't we, Brian? And so the idea is supporting the work in Barichara does directly support the work in your own bioregion if we're thinking about exchanges. And so I just want to forecast that we can help your bioregion by leveraging the stories of Barichara or specific partnerships that might emerge. We have a Waldorf school, you might know of a Waldorf school, or other things like that. So the idea is for us to learn how to do this for all of our bioregions. Does that make sense? Like, the idea here is to really to go onto the ground and say, how do we actually do this? To be able to ask questions and explore it. And eventually, I want to be able to invite you all to Barichara to organize like events where we can come together physically and you can visit some of the projects on the ground and meet some of the people, and that we do more of that into each other's bioregions as well. And so, you know, I said a little bit about that in the webinar last week, that we're going to prototype bioregional funding ecosystems in Cascadia, in Barichara, in the greater Takaranto bioregion, and in the Forest of the Northeast. And from there, all the others. But just to say that this is the direction we're going as a school. And I want to bring Barichara in as a place to do this.
All right.
So with that said, I would love to just start presenting and get us to the place where we can have conversations pretty quickly. So I'm just going to mute everyone who doesn't have their cameras muted so there's no background noise. And I'm going to start the presentation. And my presentation today, here, let's minimize that, is this. We're going to start a regenerative finance lab. So the word is lab. This is a place for experimentation and for active learning, and by learning by experimenting in the real world. So this is one of the finance labs we can have in the design school. If you want to organize a regenerative finance lab for your bioregion, bienvenidos, welcome, you can do that. And as I said, this is actually update number 27, because we have 26 previous Barichara updates that we did before. And I'm going to be making these webinar recordings publicly available outside of the design school. So if you want to share today's session with anyone in the world, please do. I'll be sharing it publicly afterwards. So here's the idea. You know, we talked about the learning journey was moving from the clarity of shared context into a design build phase. But the question is, okay, all right, we want to be design build, but where are the bioregional learning centers actually being created right now within our community? One of them is the bioregional learning ecosystem that we have been creating in Barichara. And so we're going to explore a little bit, what are we doing in Barichara? How are we creating a bioregional learning center? How does it work? And how can you as members of the school help it to get further? And then how can helping it get further help others in other bioregions? So you can help create this bioregional learning center through the design school, starting today. Or maybe you've already been helping. Some of you have helped before. And so this is a drone photo that I took a couple of days ago. This is Barichara as seen from the air. The drone is currently flying above Bioparque Moncora, which is a place that I talk about a lot. But I just wanted you to see that Barichara is not flat. This is the whole town. The town has about 6,000 people living in it. It's sitting on the edge of a cliff. It angles down into a watershed into the drainage basin of the Barichara River. All of the area to our left is degraded landscapes of the watershed of the Barichara River. And to our right is the river that has the colonizer name Rio Suarez, has the indigenous name Rio Saravita. And it's a major river valley in the middle of the Northern Andes. And we're sitting right in the middle of it. I just wanted you to feel the orientation and the tilt angle of Barichara. And you can see why it's called the prettiest town in Colombia in its tourism language, because it's a beautiful place. It's really, really pretty here. Welcome to Barichara. Here's another way of saying Barichara. It's in the place where I'd say the Northern Andes makes a sharp turn to the left to become Central America. We are not in the drainage basin of the Amazon River, but we're in a cluster of mountains and canyons that are in this sort of northern and northeastern part of Colombia. And we're in the northeastern part of the Northern Andes. And so that's a little bit of geographic orientation. But if you look at it more closely, this is from Google Earth, right there is Barichara, and we're going to fly in and look at it pretty soon. But there's this cluster of mountains. And basically, north is upward and to our left. So what looks like northeast here is actually north, because I rotated a little bit to show you the scale of regeneration that we're working on, which is that the way that the air moves into this region forms a well-defined regional climate system, which is that air circulates into this cluster of mountain ranges and canyons and river valleys to create a unique ecosystem like no other on Earth, and to create a pretty well-defined circulation pattern of air and weather. And that's why we have a pretty well-defined 500,000 hectare area of regeneration, which scales up to this regional climate system in this part of the Northern Andes. And we'll talk more about that as we go along, but I just wanted you to get a little bit of orientation to it. And to get more orientation to it, I want to go over here to Google Earth and show you from a different angle. So here, if I zoom out, you'll see that cluster of mountains in the Northern Andes. If I tilt it, you'll start to see it looking the same way that it did before. If I zoom out even further, you'll see how it's related to the northern part of South America. But what I actually want to do is zoom in and show you where Barichara is as a landscape and show you why it's so degraded. If you look at this area here that I'm moving the cursor around, this is a plateau, although it's not very table-like, because it's actually really rugged and rough. But I want you to notice is how brown and yellow it is, because this is where the tropical dry forest of our region is, that is 95% deforested. And if I zoom in more, you'll start to see more of how degraded this landscape is. Here's the town of Barichara. And if I just zoom in on a part of it, like right here, you start to see that it's scarred earth. That 80 years ago, all of this was jungle. And in the last 80 years, they've cut down 95 to 98% of the forest. And just look at how degraded it is as I move along. This is a region that's quickly becoming a desert. And just for a sense of time, over in this area here, there are now lots of houses. Google Earth doesn't update their satellite images very often. So these are actually images from about 6 or 7 years ago. So it's actually even more degraded now. Here's the town of Barichara. This area right here, this is the Bioparque Moncora that I talk about. And what I want you to see is how Barichara is situated within, let me see here, can I get it to start turning, is that as I zoom in, you'll see that Barichara is in the bottom of a river drainage with a ridge line on one side that drops pretty abruptly about 400 to 500 feet into a valley below. And here you can see that it sits on the top of a cliff. And there are all these drainages of different watersheds. So we're trying to regenerate all these watersheds. And if we zoom out, you'll see that there are some much larger structures like these canyons here. And if I can get it to tilt for me, will you tilt for me? Let's zoom up and tilt it like this. You can see that Barichara has a river, a deeper watershed going here from south to north, another one over here that's coming down from the north to the south, and another one over here that's a little harder to see that's coming in from the east. And there's this city called San Gil. And San Gil has about 50,000 people in it. If I zoom in, you can see it's a pretty big city. And so we're in an area where there's a lot of degradation. And actually, the most degraded part of the entire northern Andes is this plateau next to Barichara. If you're flying from Bogota, which is sort of somewhere down here, and you're flying up to Santa Marta, where the Kogis are, which is somewhere up here, in the middle, the most degraded part of the entire northern Andes is where we are in Barichara, Colombia, right here, this plateau. From an airplane, you'll see green and light green, and then you'll see yellow and brown where Barichara is, because it's the most degraded place. So I just wanted you to have a little bit of orientation. Okay, so we'll keep going and we'll come back to these landscape features, but I wanted you to see this because as we're talking about this regional climate system, we're really talking about a part of the northern Andes that's embedded in much larger systems, and we'll be exploring those later. But what I want to talk about now is that we're basically picking up again a kind of learning, a special kind of design. And some of this started in June of 2022 and ran through January of 2023. If you do your math, that's just a little bit more than a year, about 7 months, 8 months. During those 8 months, we had 26 Barichara update sessions that were public, that were participatory, that were part of fundraising and collaboration. We brought a lot of people from around the world to Barichara during that time. And going back a little bit farther, from November of 2020 through May of 2021, we had 18 progress reports for the Barichara Regeneration Fund that gave rise to the Barichara updates, which is to say that we had hundreds of people actively participating in creating a funding ecosystem, and we had thousands of people following along during a period of about 2 years, between November 2020 through January 2023, which is all of 2022. So it's basically like a year and a half, or a little bit less than a year and a half. And during that time, we were building in the open. And now that we've established our territorial foundation, which I'll talk about in a moment, it was legally constituted in March of this year, in 2024, we're ready to start building in the open again. We want to collaborate with people from around the world to build a funding ecosystem for the regeneration of an entire bioregion. And so I just want to name this history. If you go into the Barichara Resource Hub in the design school, you can find the recordings of all these sessions, and you'll find all of these progress reports. They're all archived there. The Barichara updates are all publicly available on my YouTube channel, and so you can share those with anyone you like. But I just wanted you to know that we're picking up on a very powerful design process that happened before and that went dormant, but it's time to revive it. And so what we're doing now is we're taking the idea of a bioregional regeneration platform, which we talked about in the learning journey here in the design school, and we're creating one in Barichara. And we're going to focus initially on a couple of regeneration funds, and I'm going to talk about these in a moment. But I just wanted you to know that because this work has already been going on for a few years, we're pretty far along. And there's a lot that's happening in the community, and I won't be able to cover it all today. But I just wanted you to know that we're designing into a very rich, very dynamic real-world context with the community of Barichara actively moving along on a daily basis. And so part of this work was creating a territorial foundation, which is called Barichara Regenerativa. And there's just a little bit of information about it. See, for us to regenerate an entire bioregion, we have to actually take an approach that looks at the whole territorial system. And so our approach has been to identify patterns of regeneration that flow across a tapestry of local projects. So we've already done the mapping of local actors, the mapping of local projects. We have had multiple times where funding has come into the community, and we've practiced allocating the funding. And so we mobilize resources, and we create pathways toward the integration of these efforts that used to be fragmented and isolated, but they're increasingly working together. And we created a territorial foundation, a nonprofit Colombian organization in Barichara called Fundación Barichara Regenerativa, or Barichara Regenerativa for short, where we gather stakeholders who represent these key processes, and they govern their own processes. They create their own agendas, their own work plans, their own budgets. When money comes into Barichara, they decide how the money is allocated. And so we've been creating a lot of structure around this. And one way of making sense of it, because it's really multifaceted, is that we've identified 5 thematic areas that help us to organize our work. And the Territorial Foundation is organized around these 5 areas. They are regenerative education, regenerative economy and economic models, alternative economic models, ecosystem restoration, or the restoration of soils, water, forest, and watersheds, cultural regeneration, which has to do with decolonization, unlearning, healing patterns, and so on. There's a lot of cultural regeneration, and territorial healing processes, which relate to things like domestic violence, destruction of land, peace building processes, trauma healing after periods of violence, and lots of other things. And in these 5 areas, we're able to organize a really beautiful richness of processes in our territory. And so we created Barichara Regenerativa. And if you want, you could think of it as like an umbrella. It's a nonprofit organization based in Barichara, but it's also a kind of scaffolding. And it's a scaffolding that allows us to bring coherence to all of the different processes happening in our territory. And what we're starting to do now, some of this work started last year and some of it's being prototyped to begin soon, is we are starting to create community funds where these funds hold key processes and organize them around thematic areas so that the complexity becomes understandable. And so we've identified 4 community funds that we have either already created or in the process of creating to be able to organize our work at the bioregional scale. One of those community funds is the Regenerative Education Fund. The Regenerative Education Fund focuses on bioregional learning within our territory that supports learning exchanges that are intergenerational between young people and older people, and that are connected to landscape restoration processes. And because there's so much education work happening in our community, we decided to prototype this fund around creating a joint budget between 3 key projects. And that joint budget between three projects allows us to practice governance. How do we create shared agendas, set priorities, define criteria? When we mobilize money, how much money do we need to mobilize? Where does it go to? If we don't have enough money, where does the money go to first? And where does money go to later? As a stakeholder network with representation from these 3 projects, Bioparque Moncura, which is a community reforestation project, Sueños del Bosque, which is a Waldorf school and community education initiative, and Origen del Agua, which is a 3-hectare reforestation and watershed restoration project with lots of educational components. And what we've done is we've created an agenda and a budget for the Regenerative Education Fund that would fully support these 3 projects and their collaboration with each other. At the same time, we're taking what we've learned from the Education Fund, which is the most developed of the funds I'm sharing with you today, to create a Restore the Rivers Fund. The Restore the Rivers Fund is about restoring the Barichara River and all the watersheds of our territory. You saw from Google Earth, this is a terribly degraded landscape, heavily deforested, heavily eroded, and all of our watersheds are dead. Either they have no water in them, or the water that's in them is so contaminated, you can't drink from it, you can't fish from it, you can't swim in it. And so the Restore the Rivers Fund is about organizing watershed governance. We're starting in 3 watersheds within the territory, and we're creating watershed governance, working with local community actors. It's grounded in community mapping and geospatial GIS mapping of geographic information systems, to be able to look at things like soil types, point sources of contamination for water, reforestation efforts, ecological corridors, and other kinds of geospatial information. And then we're using reforestation, agroforestry, food shed restoration, and agriculture as it's connected to watersheds. And all of this is being coordinated within the Restore the Rivers Fund. So you can already see there's so much complexity in the Education Fund and the Restore the Rivers Fund that they need to basically become managed units. So I am the project manager of the Regenerative Education Fund. One of my partners in this work, Natalia Ortiz, is the project manager of the Restore the Rivers Fund. And then we work together to create collaboration between the two funds. But that's not enough. We have way too much work already happening in the community. So we're about to create a regenerative economy fund, which will be that we're going to learn from the way we create budgets and agendas from the Education Fund and the Restore the Rivers Fund. And then we're going to apply that to the processes that are transforming local resources and material flows of products and materials within our community's economy. There's work being done to create a community currency, alternative economic exchange models. There's a community store. There are about 100 local producers that are already collaborating. There's a huge amount of work happening in regenerative economics. So we're going to create a regenerative economy fund. And we're already talking with a community leader named Felipe Spath and talking to him to see if he would like to be the project manager of that fund so we can all collaborate together, because he coordinates a lot of those activities already. But we're in the early days of creating that fund. And then the fourth fund that we're creating is the Cultural Healing Fund. The Cultural Healing Fund is about gathering the key processes in our territory that relate to arts and culture and theater, to cultural trauma and healing, to the holding of dialogues and partnerships and collaboration around watershed restoration, around domestic violence, around poor people in certain parts of the territory having health epidemics because of water contamination and other things that are unfolding in the community. And then inviting a person from our territorial foundation named Emilce Gonzalez and asking if she would be the project manager for that fund. By the way, we haven't talked to Emilce about that yet. And I'm telling you first, because you can see that we are in the middle of prototyping all of this. We're creating this bioregional funding ecosystem as a collection of portfolios, where each portfolio is its own fund. But how do they avoid fragmentation? And the way they avoid fragmentation is our foundation, Barichara Regenerativa, has those 5 thematic areas, which means we have a committee within the foundation that creates coordination and shared learning across the funds. So we're actually creating collective governance for our territory by creating project management within each focus thematic area. Each thematic area is organizing multi-stakeholder networks for shared budgets and shared agendas. But then we're creating a territorial agenda and territorial budgets by gathering these funds into the same portfolio. If you wanted to think of this as spreadsheets, you could think of each fund as a spreadsheet, but then all of them together would be a database of spreadsheets. But in practice, it's community dialogues, learning exchanges, setting agendas, identifying priority areas, and creating learning exchanges between the different funds. And so underneath or behind these 4 community funds is the Bioregional Learning Center, which is the information commons that is learning from each fund, learning between each fund, and sharing the learnings across the community processes within and beyond all of the funds. Which is to say, Barichara Regenerativa, the foundation, is creating 4 community funds so that we can coordinate efforts and have clarity between them. But below, more foundationally, we're creating a learning ecosystem that is the Barichara Ecoversity, our bioregional learning ecosystem. All of that is happening in the background. And so there's an incredible richness to this. There's a huge amount of work that's already happening, but I wanted you to at least see some of the structures that we're putting in place, because you can imagine creating similar structures for your bioregion. And in the design school, we want to help you do that. So the idea is for this regenerative finance lab, the one that we're in right now, We're going to start by focusing on the education fund. In the education fund, we want to create two key structures, and this is what we want your help to create. So what we want to do is create a regenerative education fund that has community partners and that they support the full funding of Bioparque Moncora, Sueños del Bosque, and Origen del Agua, a community reforestation project, a community Waldorf school, and a community watershed restoration project with a strong educational component. And we already have a budget for 2025 that requires us to raise $100,000 to fund all three projects. So the idea is, in the next 6 months, we want to raise $100,000 to fund this education fund in 2025 in a way that helps us all learn how to do this in our own bioregions. So that's the idea. That's what we want to do. But how do we do it? Well, we would do it by creating a community funding pool. So we're going to talk about what are the community funding pools that already exist in the design school, that already exist in Barichara. How can we create bioregional learning processes for Barichara by mobilizing resources into different community funding pools? So we'll be exploring how to do that in this design lab. And we want to create a donor support network for Barichara and learn how to create the same kind of donor support networks for all of your bioregions. We want to invite people from all over the world to join a support network for Barichara and figure out how to do it, and then replicate that process for the other bioregions associated with the design school. So we'll be talking a lot more about these as structures and how they work. But the idea is today I want to just introduce this context to you for you to see that these are the kinds of things that I want to invite us to do together and then ask, is this really what we want to do together? So we'll be talking about that in a moment. But the other thing I want to say before ending the presentation is that a couple of weeks ago, I invented this, the Better Than Carbon Offsets program, because in 2 moments in the last 6 months, people arrived
Hello.
to,
Yeah, I'm here. Hi,
oh, Larry, could you mute yourself, please?
Ted.
Oh, okay, well, I can.
Yeah, I am.
No worries, I can mute him for us. The idea was this, I actually don't need to show my slides anymore for this, is that 2 different times small businesses approached me, people I knew on LinkedIn, and said, I'm so inspired by what you're doing. We have a carbon offsets program, but none of our employees actually believe it works. Could we just donate our money to you and Barichara instead? Because the way you post on LinkedIn and Twitter is enough proof for us it's making a difference. And I was like, maybe other people would want to do that too. Maybe all of our bioregions could pool funding from local businesses who are annoyed the carbon offsets program are mostly a scam, or even the ones that try to work. How the hell can you tell if they work? This could be a great funding mechanism for your bioregion. So I just want to share that as an example of a donor support network. Could be small businesses who donate money into a bioregional fund instead of into a carbon offsets program, and then form direct relationships with the regeneration projects in your own landscape, which breaks the whole narrative of carbon, which is reductionistic and stupid, and gets us thinking holistically and gets people connecting to real landscapes. So I want to share that as an example. But so yeah, so basically the idea is in this design lab, I'd love your help raising $100,000 for Barichara for next year. And to do it in a way that lets us practice using these structures so that we can say, well, wow, while we're doing that, I might talk to someone who lives in Florida that gives some money to a school in Barichara, but now they're a friend who knows a little bit about this approach. Maybe they'd fund something that's happening in the Tampa Bay. Or maybe they could help us set up a similar structure here. You see, it's like, it's so ironic how hard it is to fund our own landscapes. But if you get someone funding someone else's landscape, you actually get them learning how to do community philanthropy, and it strengthens your ability to do it locally. So that's the idea. So what I'd love to do with the rest of our time today is just open it up for discussion, which is to start to answer any questions or any comments you have. And then from there, for us to sort of create an agenda together in a general sense. It doesn't have to be very detailed. How does this land with you? What would you like to be a part of? What would you like to see us do here? Are you excited about the way that I described this, or would you change it? Because what I see is in the design school, we need our work to get into the real world as much as possible. And because of how much work that's happening on the ground, you could actually help regeneration in Barichara. And from there, we can take it into our work that's coming in the future of prototyping bioregional funding ecosystems all over the world, which includes yours. So that's the idea. I just talked a whole bunch. So I'd like to just go into listening mode and, ask if you raise your hand, if you have any questions or comments. How do you feel about this? What do you think? What do we do together? Penny's got her hand up, but maybe should I let Chris go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was second.
Okay, so Chris is first, then I'll put Penny in the lineup, and then whoever else wants to go after that. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. I am so kind of blown away by what all that you've shared, and I think the top line reflection I wanted to offer is I'm just thinking about the human capacity development that you must have been working on all these past years. And as I think about the bioregion that I hope to return to here fairly soon in New Mexico, and I'm just thinking about what capacity is there currently within the bioregion. I'm thinking about your reflection in another session where you talked about bringing money into a region and all the complexity that introduced, right? And so, and I don't want to, if this is really too rich a topic to maybe it, is another time to discuss, but I'm just thinking as someone who will be entering into a region and essentially starting your journey many years ago, as being a newcomer and really just doing a lot of sense making and trying to understand what capacity is there already, and then what does it take to start to weave the high trust relationships and really set the foundation for even having a conversation about building a regenerative finance lab. And so I guess to bring this to a close is I'm just thinking about kind of order of operations in some sense of like, how do I continue to start with what is the most foundational layer and kind of build up to where you are now? Again, maybe that's not appropriate for this session, but I just wanted to offer that as a reflection.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I would just say for now, it is a really rich conversation and it will be a recurring theme. I just noticed Tom's on here. Hey, Tom, how you doing? And doing a lot of work in Santa Marta in Colombia. And it's like, oh my God, trying to build trust. It's so political, right, Tom? So anyway, to say there are other people in this community who have a lot of experience, not just me. And I just was calling Tom out because I wanted to say hi. But to say like, so much of the work is what you're naming. And one of the ways that you can piggyback that forward, which is something that Brian and Susan have done in the GTB, is to leverage the stories of another landscape to inspire their own landscape to do it, which is one of the elements. But just to say, yeah, we will definitely explore those things throughout. But I just want to name that dance between those more advanced and those less advanced in the process is the real beauty of this. That's where the catalyzing happens. Yeah, then I'll pass it over to Penny.
So the one thing that I'm really inspired about or excited about is on that last slide about the carbon offsets, where it said something like relationships are what matter. Relationships is what matter. So for me, it's like, how do we bring in donors or investors or whatever who actually want to have a relationship with what's going on? So they don't want to just like throw the money at it and go away, but they want to be involved in the process. So like with the carbon offsets, they're watching the process. They're at least watching it on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, and they can feel what's happening, and so they want to give into it. But is there like even a deeper relationship? Like, do they want to come visit Barichara? Like how do we inspire the people who actually want a real relationship? That's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah. And if anyone has a question or comment, you want to jump in, please do. Hunter, please.
Hopefully y'all can hear me well. Thanks for doing this. I always appreciate seeing what's going on and trying to draw parallels between the work that I'm trying to do. I'm in Southwestern Virginia in Roanoke, and I just kind of want to share kind of this continuous experience and maybe get some insight. It doesn't sound like you've bumped into maybe this in a way that at least I've yet tapped into in any of the learning elements that have been shared. But here at least there's the kind of existing infrastructure, mostly what we might call like the nonprofit industrial complex, which in many ways captures a lot of energy. Certainly it captures a lot of resources, and it unfortunately tends to just divert it away from the people who are on the ground doing the work. I don't know if y'all had experiences around that, but in trying to view this, and it looks like you're smiling and laughing, I'm sure you did. In trying to view this, however, from drawing as many parallels as possible, and more importantly, trying to do as much groundwork here as I can, and figuring out how to support this and also how to receive support. If you could speak to maybe just a little bit of that, or direct me to resources if it's kind of outside of the scope of what it was that you, of maybe what you thought was most pertinent to why you initiated this particular call, because I don't want to derail the conversation, but it seemed to jump to the forefront of my mind.
Well, it's actually very much related to what Penny said, which is that we have discovered in practice that if you work with organizations, you're probably going to go nowhere. But if you work with human relationships with people, then you can go really far. Now, those people are connected with organizations, so organizations come into the flow somewhere. But the actual work is human to human. And that's where deep trust, that's where passion, that's where energy, that's where all of that happens. And so like the example, my friend Hans, who just brought us 1,300 euros, about $1,500 from the carbon offset program of his company in Germany. Hans is an old friend of mine. I've known him since like 2013. He brought me to Northern Italy at one point to do some work with a sustainability consulting network he's a part of. He donated $1,000 into the Barichara pledge community 2 years ago and helped us fund some of our work here. So he's been in deep relationship with us. And what he was doing was he was talking with his team, and they were all frustrated about their carbon offsets. There's like, we think this is bullshit. And because he and I already had this really good relationship, his organization could come into relationship because he and I had this human relationship. And so what we found over and over again is that the deep work is in that interhuman, not interorganizational space. The organizations come in as a sort of extension of the humans rather than the other way. But on the other side, what you find is that the ability for people to do this is the extent to which they are decolonized. Because just being in an organization is a form of domestication and colonization. And so there's this whole conversation there, opening a huge can of worms. But it's a really big deal that the most powerful change makers use organizations as tools, and they pick them up and set them down like you'd pick up a hammer, rather than their identities being fused to the organization and they're trying to serve the needs of the organization, which is really different from supporting their agreements to the people in the organization, which is human to human. And so there's a real subtlety in it, but it's a really powerful distinction. If you come into trying to organize an alliance of organizations, you're going to get that little sticker soup of everyone's affiliations, and then all kinds of watered down nonsense when you try and move money through it. It doesn't happen every time, but it's probably like 99%. It's like, you'll be very likely to get money to move through it to the people on the ground. Much more to be said there, but I see Brian has something to say there. So Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. There's a few of us on this call who've followed the Barichara work for a number of years now. And the first thing I want to say is a brilliant piece of work, Joe and Penny. And the whole systems, the weaving, the relationship building, the trust building that you've done over the last few years has been amazing. And it requires a high degree of skill and care and tending to. And these things don't happen overnight. And congratulations on getting the local foundation off the ground. That's huge. And you've connected that into the Northern Andes group of foundations that's forming. So huge amount of work there that's coming to fruition. In terms of the topic that people are you're just talking about, in our bioregion here in the Greater Toronto area, it's huge population, huge amount of organizations, very complex. And for us, it's about entering into the work with a lot of care and relationship building, but trying to choose those relationships very carefully in terms of people who can think at a whole systems level, people that aren't tied to a particular organization's mission really tightly, that are able to look at the bigger picture, or they're able to look at the whole systems bioregional approach and the value in that. And that takes time and a lot of care and attention and discussion, but you can get there. We've made amazing progress here in the GTB, and a lot of it had to do with Joe and Penny coming in to do strategic presentations. So the first time we brought them in a year and a half ago, we developed presentations with them for the local conservation authorities that manage our watersheds, for the municipalities, for the regenerative agriculture folks, for the general public, for the schools and students. And that led to more strategic meetings 6 months later, which led to the 7th Generation Bioregional Earth Summit this past February. So gradually building, and there's so much work going on at the lower mycelia level that people don't see, but there's an enormous amount of work happening, and every now and then you'll see the fruition of that with something blossoming forward. And we're now working on the bioregional funding ecosystem and the portfolio projects. We have a prototype of that in place. So we're moving ahead really well here, but it does take a lot of time and effort and attention and care. And we've learned so much from Joe and Penny and the work they've done in Barichara, just brilliant whole systems work. And all of us working in our unique contexts around the world can share as we all move forward through this process. And I think we'll learn a lot from each other, because there's so much expertise and care and passion in the group here in the design school. Getting back to the funding part, yeah, we found it's really valuable to connect particularly students to the North-South collaboration, to what's happening in Barichara, and others who are interested in education, because getting kids to think about the fact that they're all different bioregions around the world with different contexts, and we can learn so much from each other, means a great deal. So that's a really good foundation for trying to interest people in supporting that work, because as Joe said, you can see the results of the work on the ground. You can participate in these Zoom calls if you'd like. You can read the articles that Joe posts online, and the photos and the videos. It's all really powerful. So I'll leave it at that, but just some thoughts that I had as I was watching everything today.
Thank you, Brian. And one thing I wanted to say is that there's this huge discussion that people have about reporting and evaluation. Like, I'm part of the Gitcoin community that uses Web3 tools to mobilize money into regenerative projects. And one of the big questions is, people go and request money in the climate coordination round. But are they actually doing the climate work? And some people, because there's a tech bro culture that's a subset of that. Some of them are like, but you're just full of shit. And you see these sort of like really ugly behaviors sometimes. And just to be able to see, yeah, but just look at my Twitter feed. Here's some pictures. And the fact that we can actually do this work in the open, and that anyone who wants to can verify what's going on by attending one of these live sessions or watching the recordings. And so one of the things that we've prototyped for Barichara that you could replicate for another bioregion is a communication ecosystem. So here's what I'm envisioning for Barichara. We already have Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. There are various ways that I play in that space. We have a website called Regenerate Barichara. We have the design school, and then we have various different ways of organizing. And now I'm going to have every other week a Barichara session that'll be recorded and made public. And anyone who funds the work in Barichara can attend these sessions. They don't have to be in the design school. They can attend these sessions. And now what you start to have is a communication system for not just funders and reporting, but community learning, where we become community learners. And as community learners, you don't actually have to create a trust measure that's the replacement for trust, where it's like, okay, I need you to do an evaluation because I don't know if you've done it. I will trust if you've done it, if you do the evaluation. That becomes unnecessary, because the trust is in the relationships of the active communication and the active exchanges. And what I found is most people who've given money to Barichara don't watch the Barichara updates, but they just know they exist, and they can go and watch them at any time because they're on my YouTube channel. And so you see, it's a way of creating an open transparency accountability system. So think about if you were to create something similar for your bioregion. So this is something that when we're thinking of creating bioregional funding ecosystems, it might be that the GTB starts doing reporting, in quotes, the way that we're doing in Barichara, by having a monthly GTB session. That's just an information session that's made public. Social media allows us to do this kind of thing. And so it's just a really different way of doing accountability. So there are things like this that I wanted to just name that are part of what this is, so that we can see how powerful it is to do it together. So Chris, back over to you.
I thought I would just ask some level setting questions here to maybe just add some color, and it might spark ideas here. I think the first level setting question I want to ask was, when we're thinking about potential funders here, what types of funders are you thinking of? Do you have, you could think about different possibilities there, and kind of positives and negatives with each type. So one thing that kind of caught my ear was the idea of getting money from local businesses within the region. So obviously that's interesting in terms of kind of keeping capital flows in the space, but that's also making me think about other areas where the resources might not be there within the region, right? So we need capital flows in from external sources. So anyway, I thought I'd put that on the table just to see if you could expand on that, and that might kind of lead us into other questions.
That's a really good question. Thank you, Chris. Let me first share the kinds of investors that have worked so far. And you'd say, we need to go somewhere else, we need to go further. The most important donors and investors in this work are people who give small amounts of money, like crowdfunding, $50, $100, some modest amount. But they become part of the story, and then they become storytellers. And so there's something really powerful about, philanthropy 101, donor relationships, like building relationships with people who are putting the money in, which is this is how investment should be done always, is good customer relationships, good personal relationships. And so the foundation of this is really people giving small amounts of money who become part of the story, who then bring a lot more value than the money. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways we've done this that was interesting as an experiment was we did this thing called the pledge community, where we asked people to give $1,000. So we created a high bar in one sense, but also a modest bar. There are a lot of people who can't afford $1,000, but those who can could probably afford more. You create this interesting dynamic of capable people who could give more who invest themselves in the story. And so that's one way of thinking of it, is people who, if they were committed to the story, would actually bring more capacities and definitely more value than the money itself. And so these sort of small scale donor investors is really interesting. Another thing that has happened is, like I mentioned, these small businesses, socially minded people who own a small business or are part of a team in a small business, but they could leverage the pooled resources of the business. this will tend to still be a modest amount of money, so most people wouldn't go after it. Like the two small businesses doing carbon offsets, one of them gave us 7,500 euros, the other gave us 1,300 euros. So in dollars, it's like $8,000, $1,500. These are small amounts of money, but it's more than most individuals could donate.
Mhm.
So to have 8 or 10 of these relationships is a game changer, because you don't just have the business that gives the money, the employees of the business might choose to give money too. So you see, I have this way of sort of nesting and scaling, even though it's still with modest amounts of money. A third one is decentralized Web3 enabled processes like Gitcoin or Giveth. These ways of pooling and flowing money using Web3 technologies. In Barichara, we've received now about $50,000 or $60,000 in total from multiple rounds of Gitcoin and Giveth, which are using Web3 tools to mobilize things into networks. And you can start to see interesting things about how to do that. So basically how to bring the bioregions as projects onto those technology platforms
Mhm.
to have Barichara in the next Gitcoin round of matching funds. And then getting into the relationships of, well, who's announcing the next matching round and how do we get invited to that one too? And it turns out the Web3 community is really good at collaborating. They're technology people who do open source, so they're really good at collaborating in this way. And so there's a lot of resource flow that happens there. And then another one is really strategic, largely invisible foundations.
Mhm.
Like we received $10,000 from the Mustard Seed Trust in the Netherlands, which actually just decided they're closing. But they're a small foundation. They're a network of donors in the Netherlands who have funded things like grassroots economics, which does really awesome work in Eastern Africa. And they funded other really powerful things because they're a small and agile group of donors who have organized into a largely invisible, like Mustard Seed Trust has done amazing work, but they've also not given more than $20,000 or $25,000 to someone, and you only get funded by invitation.
Mhm.
So there's something about those family foundations or strategic funding groups that are really aligned in personal relationships.
Hmm.
And so we're starting to do things with Novo Foundation and larger amounts of funding, but that's a whole different scale of funding ecosystems and funding infrastructure and larger amounts of money. Like we just received $150,000 in Barichara, and it's funding about 10 local processes, and it's allowing us to build a lot of this infrastructure. But that's after the couple of years of doing it before. And
Yeah.
it's really rare to find those relationships. So I think it's really focused on human relationships with small businesses. It's basically small networks of people. Small networks of people in technology, in business, in philanthropy that will be the ones that can leverage the bigger changes, is where I think
Okay.
would be the focus for now. And I think
That's-
we're going to apply in other landscapes too.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
super helpful. I mean, it's just some quick reflections. It's making me think about some platforms. One here in the US that's investing in regenerative agriculture is this outfit called Steward. And they're doing exactly this, where they're crowdfunding various projects for within regenerative agriculture space. They can take donation or essentially contributions as small as $100. They're primarily doing loans out to various operations and so forth. But I think the other thing here, though, that you're focusing on, Joe, that I really hadn't thought about so much is essentially contributions that are other than financial capital, and particularly the social capital aspect. So it makes me think of just in the, in the technology realm and in the venture investing community of Angel List as an example, right? So bringing together kind of syndicates to invest in particular, technology startups. But the platform itself is that it's much more than just about making money flow. And so it almost feels like there might be a need here for new technology platforms to essentially help facilitate kind of the social capital there, where you can have communications with the donor community or folks who are not contributing capital at all, but they're facilitating relationship development and so forth, and other types of flows, non-financial flows. Does that make sense or land?
Yeah, it's actually something Joan and I were talking about before everyone else arrived. It's like Joan said, I don't know that much about finance. It's like, do you know how to build relationships? Because it turns out that's mostly what building a financial system is actually mostly about relationships. So hell yes. Thanks for that reflection, Chris. Carrie, over to you and welcome.
Hi, thank you. I have a million questions, but maybe to sort of just continue the conversation and build on some of Chris's points. I mean, some of the work we're doing in the Global Regenerative Finance Initiative is trying to think about how to actually accommodate those multiple forms of capital in the way we actually quantify the investments. So meaning redesigning the tools of finance itself and internalizing the externalities. And we don't know how to do it, but that's the question that we're exploring. So to your point, with the building of relationships and networks and, including and inviting different kinds of contributions, how do we expand, the value of a fund, for example? I don't know if you've thought much more about that, Joe, but I'd be curious.
Yes, I've thought a lot about that. I have too much to say about it. I'll say something brief and then pass it to Jenny.
Okay.
I know we'll return to this many times. I actually wrote an art. I was one of those like really clever people that like did silly stuff. So back in 2011, I did crowdfunding to raise money to create a manual on how to do crowdfunding. And then in the manual, we said it's not about money. Crowdfunding is about building community. We wrote a series of articles on shareable.net. It was like way back in the early days. But I was like, it's not about the money, stupid. To sort of paraphrase that political statement, it's not about the money. That crowdfunding is about relationships. And so one of the interesting things about measurement is that if we get caught in talking about measurement, we tend to become reductionistic. But if we see measurement as supporting relationships and supporting stories, then it may not be reductionistic. So an example, we're going to have kids doing citizen science in Barichara to find the contaminants going into our river. Well, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of measurement, but what we really care about is the story of the kids going around doing citizen science, right? But someone's going to create a map with data, with verification. It'll be there, but it's delivered in a relational context of a story. But if you want to, you can go and look at the data. You go look at a report someone did. And so the idea is that reporting still happens, but it's sort of its level of importance is lower. It's like, yeah, reporting happens, but if we all trust each other, it's not we all trust each other, so therefore we're a cult or we're doing nonsense. It's we trust each other because we have various ways of seeing that we can trust what's going on. One of them is that someone gathered data and mapped it. So anyone who wants to can look at that. And then someone else is an expert on data quality and they commented on it. And you're like, oh, we just got expert feedback evaluating the method, but it was in a conversational context. And so I think this way of seeing measurement nested within human relationship rather than as the replacement for human relationship is a huge strategic move. It has implications all across the whole thing. Because measurement's still there, reporting's still there, it's just less important. Not less important in a sort of ontological sense. It needs to be there. But where it needs to be and when it needs to be and what the priority is a question of trust. If we trust each other, we can measure it later. Right now, what we got to focus on is resolving conflicts, creating governance. We'll gather the data later. That's legit as a developmental process, So just naming that part of this is reframing the role of data, reframing the role of measurement into a human, relational, and ecological lens. I feel like I just, teed up Jenny to like knock it out of the park or something. So I don't know what Jenny's gonna say, but I'll pass it over to Jenny. Oh, Jenny, you're muted.
He's on mute.
Sorry. I was too excited to talk. I wasn't going to talk about data until you mentioned the data word, but what I'm hearing is that what you've learned over the years about creating a transparent information ecology goes a long way to healing one of the critical factors in systems in society, which is our broken data ecology. So that feels really powerful to me. But actually what I was going to say, and you also mentioned young people, was in the research we're doing at the moment, we're looking in Asia as well as many other territories. And there's quite a trend, I hate the word trend, happening in Asia with family funds and philanthropic funds and high net worth individuals that are experimenting with different groups of young people to enable young people to act as core teams who source projects that need funding and make decisions about where funding can go within a process of learning how to do, they don't use the term regenerative, how to do restorative work themselves so that as they grow up an adult, they have built enormous capacity for resilience and regeneration themselves. And I think there could be something really interesting in those patterns that I'm seeing in Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia, where I'll be in August, that could fit into this really well, if that makes sense to everyone.
You know, you're making me think of a group in India that has been using Web3 tools to develop some approaches like what you're describing. And they use a lot of gamification, like game design, what they do with badges and challenges and going on adventures and stuff. But it's really about building up the alternative resume so you don't have to get accredited by a university.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so it's like, you know,
the Indonesian government is putting a lot of money into right across Indonesia, enabling young people to go out and do restorative and regenerative work, not in any exploitative way, but as part of completely transforming the curriculum and the learning process for young people in those countries to make it 21st century fit to the challenges that are the existential challenges that they're facing. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because that has been quite an exciting discovery for me.
oh, I love it. Thank you, Jenny.
And I missed you at 3 o'clock, just yeah, like we were supposed to be chatting at 3.
Yeah, I sent you a message about like, oh, I had 2 JRF meetings with 2 different groups and I confused them and we rescheduled.
No worries.
Them. And then, yeah,
No,
so
no worries. It gave me a chance to be here, so that's good.
Yeah, I stood Jenny up today, so sorry about that, Jenny. One of the things that I think is really interesting about what we're doing right now is we have real world design challenges. And one of the real world design challenges we can name in a really concrete way, but then how we do it becomes very interesting. So here's the design challenge I proposed in the presentation. Let's raise $100,000 for the Barichara Education Fund by the end of this year. See, that was the challenge that I named. All right, so how do we go about doing a challenge like that? Well, let's see here. We could ask 200 people to give $500 each and get $100,000. We could find 10 companies that do carbon offsets, each for $10,000. You see, like, I'm just giving examples. Like, you can play with this so many creative ways. And what gets interesting is as we start doing it, what we discover is it's all about conversations and relationships and participation in an emerging story. And one of the stories that we're going to roll out soon, so you're getting a little like sneak peek of it, is I gave a webinar back in April of 2020, early in the days of Earth Regenerators, called Creating the Earth Regeneration Fund. Then we did a lot of work to move toward that. We prototyped the Barichara Regeneration Fund, say the first bioregional fund to move toward the Earth, the planetary scale. Well, we're going to bring that thing back to life. We're going to create a US nonprofit and create the Earth Regeneration Fund. So right now, with this $100,000 we're raising for Barichara, we're prototyping part of the Earth Regeneration Fund. Now just think about how much fun this storytelling is going to be. When we're like, so I'm not just looking for someone to give money to Barichara, I'm weaving people into a story of building a planetary network of bioregional regeneration funds. or just parallel prototypes. They don't even have to all be in the same network. You know, just like people who are trying to figure out how to do this. And the best way to learn is to practice. It's to practice doing it. And then leverage those same relationships into the other processes. And so what I want to sort of name here is that we'll do another one of these sessions in 2 weeks. But between now and then, I'm going to continue to work with Barichara Regenerativa, building our processes on the ground. We have today, this afternoon, we have the summer solstice celebration of Sueños del Bosque, the school that's weaving in the territory. There's like all kinds of stuff going on. And the question becomes, how do you personally want to be connected to what's going on in Barichara? That's one question. Like, would you donate money into this fund? Would you come to Barichara? Would you send someone to Barichara? Would you just tell it as a story to support your work locally? From there, be creative. You can see, how do you want to be part of the story of Barichara? That's one question. Then another question is, how do you want to be part of what the design school is doing? A scaffolding for learning exchanges between bioregions, as we're learning through this in many places. How do you want to be part of that story? How do you want that story to be part of what you're doing? Something Penny and I talk a lot about is that we invite people to put on their leadership hats, but most people are so used to letting someone else be the leader that they don't actually come and lead something. And we want to just break that. We're like, let's just break that. Let's all lead on all kinds of things, but we support each other with stories. The stories are what build the coherence. So if I'm going to talk to Brian and Susan, how do we help them build their learning ecosystem in the greater Takaranto? Well, part of it is, how can they leverage what we're doing in Barichara to help them? And who might they know that would fund us to help them? That was how we started with Brian and Susan. That's what led to the 7 Generations Bioregional Earth Summit. Well, like Brian said earlier, it led to something way beyond what we could imagine. So I just want to invite you to sort of like your homework today is think about, what is the story that Barichara is a part of that you want to be part of your story? Just think about that. Because then you can think about that for any other context that you want to think about it. But here we're going to have an organized, bi-weekly group. We're going to meet every other week, and we're going to work on raising $100,000 for Barichara, and we're going to bring lots of interesting people together. And as we bring them together, they might be excited to support something else they learn about in the design school, or something else they learn about in your community, whether or not it's in the design school. See how I'm meeting Brian's criteria, that I'm loosely holding my own organizational affiliation, which is really important in this. And so yeah, Chris, your hand's been up for a little while and I've just been rambling. What would you like to share?
Just another level setting question is the distinction between return seeking capital and return seeking capital. So in a lot of the work that I'm hearing, it sounds like you would be looking for non-return seeking capital. But I assume there might be other things where some sort of return seeking capital at some point in time might be appropriate. I just wanted to put that on the table and ask you just to respond to that, just so that it's very clear what we're looking for here.
Yeah, I want to use one of Willem Verwerda at the Common Land Foundation, one of his most important creations, which is Willem Verwerda's friends with lots of rich people who would not give money to support biodiversity because they had no ecological knowledge. They're smart people, but they're really ecologically dumb. And so Willem Verwerda had to create a really dumb way to talk about how to invest in ecosystems. So he created a framework called the 4 returns, which is part of the Common Land Foundation's package. If you join the Common Land Foundation's work, one of the things is you agree to use the 4 returns as language in your landscape. That's part of being in Common Lands Network. The 4 returns: financial return, ecological return, social/economic return in its various forms, and inspiration return. Guess which one's most powerful? 10 to 1 inspiration is more powerful than any of the others. Inspiration and passion, storytelling and being part of a story drives all of the others. And so that's what they found in practice, working with large-scale landscape regeneration. And so already those are 4 returns. You can add more. You can do the 8 multi-capital, the 8 capitals, information capital, social capital, But the important thing is that what you're talking about is non-return. I know it's very specific. Someone invests money to get a direct financial return on their investment, which is how most of the impact funding works. I would say that anyone who needs a financial return from the very beginning is already not spiritually mature enough to participate. Sorry, I'll offend them. They have some growing up to do. We're in the collapse of the biosphere and human extinction. You really need more money. When you have money, go fuck yourself. Go sit down and grow up a little bit. But people who can see financial return as part of a funding ecosystem, as a way of returning money into the investing pool, the smart investment, hell yeah, that can come in, but you don't put that in day one.
For sure.
You put it in later when there's a maturity of the market. So any smart investor, anyone who works with institutional investing, portfolio investing, risk managed investing will know that you have a mixed pool of capital that you have to invest. They will know that already. They'll probably know it better than we do. So the important thing here is to say, we are building relationships around scalable returns that are scalable because they're ecosystemic. And the initial returns are trust, ecological impact, returning land to the commons, education, human capacity, leadership cultivation, all kinds of things that are what you would need as an investor to create a successful business anyway. The key to success of a business investment is the team of people who are managing the business. And so the idea is that there are lots of returns, but financial return needs to be kept away until the ecosystem is ready for it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and this is really important.
And also, like, if you're in a degraded landscape, right, it has to start to recover. You can't just it's a degraded landscape. So the return has to be once there's recovery, once there's enough recovery.
Yeah, you can't extract from a degraded system. You have to rebuild the capacity of the system, and then it may or may not make sense to extract from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point here is that one of the most powerful poisons of impact is financial pressure to service debt. If you take out loans to buy a piece of land, guess what destroys your social mission? Paying off the land. So what we have to do is free these regenerative projects from financial pressure. This is critical. And then another thing we have to do is create commons. Commons like human leadership commons, land commons, housing commons. I can just get access to housing without having to pay for it. And if I run a regenerative project, I don't have to pay someone more because they get their housing, quote, for free, because it's part of the ecosystem, to lower the financial element. These are all parts of how we do this in practice. And so, Carrie, you just asked some great questions in the chat. How does this relate to planetary boundaries? Simple. We have to measure carrying capacity of our landscapes and bioregions. And then we have to do nested up and down levels of measurement. Whole conversation there. It's huge. But just to say that the only way that we can do the regenerative work that's needed is to work at whole system scales, to work holistically. And holistically means that we don't have reductionistic measures. And measures that would otherwise reductionistic are in a relational context that is holistic. So beans, here we go. Speak my language. So yeah, so I guess I just want to know, are there any other questions? Are you in? Is this a mission you're aligned with? Do you want to do this? How would you like to participate? It could be thumbs up, thumb down. It could be, I got to sleep on it. But I just want to do a little litmus test. Yeah, we could do a round. Actually, that's a great idea. Let's do a round.
Okay.
Penny. She has such good ideas. Let's do a round. The round, this will be like a closing circle. So all this is we're going to do a checkout. In a checkout, we're about 7 minutes from our scheduled closing time. There are about 20 of us here. So the idea is brief. You could say a word, you could say a few sentences, but we're going to have plenty of time to go deeper. But we'll just go around. And the way we'll go around is I will invite someone to go first. I'm going to put them on the spot right now. Let's see, who will it be? Who will it be? Brian, can I put you on the spot? Okay, so Brian will go first. So the way it works is I'm going to pass it to Brian, and Brian will pass it to someone else. So you get one round of pass. Someone could pass it to you, and we pass it forward until we've covered everyone. And so the idea is just a quick checkout. How you doing? Victoria said she has to leave for another meeting, so I don't know if, they already left. Never mind. I was gonna say we could let them go after Brian. But we'll just pass it forward and just a quick checkout. You can say, I'm in, I'm curious, I'm confused, just a little checkout. How you feeling? And then we'll go from there. And so, and remember Penny's here, so Penny can be included. And I'll pass it to Brian.
Definitely in. We need to do things differently. We can't recreate existing systems. Over to you, Joan.
I'm in. I'm very much on board for something that's not extractive. And I'll pass it to Vivo.
I'm in, thinking about the best way to get involved, but really just thinking about doing this here will enable me to do this elsewhere. So that's what I'm thinking. And I pass the mic to Tom.
Hi Vivo, hi Joe, hi everybody. I am in. I'm very much in, deeply into regenerating the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. I think we have funding. It's come through exactly what Joe said, which is weaving. It's creating relationships of trust, particularly with the indigenous, and taking leadership from those who really have the authority in the territory, and then just socializing in the community through physical face-to-face reunions. I won't take up too much more time, but I'm really excited to get more involved in the next meeting, and I'm sorry I'm late in this one.
Yeah, and pass it forward.
I pass it to Ed Niembro.
Pronounced beautifully. I just arrived just when Joe said I've spoken enough. It's up to everybody else now to speak. So, but I'm still in, and it was just a rich conversation to hear afterwards. So, but again, I'm gonna have to listen to the video to make sure what I'm getting in is not way deep. But no, but I'm loving this. So, yeah, I'm in. So, thanks again. I apologize. Next time I will be on time. We'll pass on to Beans. Frijoles.
Thank you, Ed. I'm definitely in. Always. I'm in for everything. So if you need me to come to Barichara and dig a hole, I'm in. Whatever you want, I'm in. So I'm there. And yeah, let's leverage some of these Web3 tech bros and figure out how we can utilize their tech for it. So I'm in.
Thank you, Beans. Would you like to pass it forward?
I'm gonna pass it to Carrie.
Thank you. I'm so in and feeling humbled and metabolizing precisely the way I want to relate, but definitely in. So thank you. And I will pass it to Marie.
Hi. Yeah, I'm always super inspired and curious, and we are quite neighbors here with Joe and Penny. I'm also in Colombia, not now, but so I'm really looking forward to discussing it also in the Spanish-speaking community, all these things. And I'll pass it over to Jenny, maybe? Jenny, I don't know. She's not there, right? So.
No, yeah, Jenny had to leave.
Oh, if you can help me because I cannot see all the people. Yeah. So
Sure. How about Karen?
Hi, everyone. am in. I'm figuring out what that means for me. I think that's very interesting. I am trying to think about what a trip to Barichara would look like. And especially with, kind of mirroring different Sueños del Bosque kind of forest education, forest school, river school, those sorts of things. Very interesting to me. Thank you.
And then how about if I'll pass it on for us to Sarah?
Thanks. Yeah, I am in, and I just resonate so much with the comments about focusing on individuals, relationships, and the immense opportunity for inspiration that this presents. Liz, have you spoken yet?
I'll put my comment in the chat. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, we can't hear you very well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we can't hear you very well. She said, I like the idea. Do you want to try again, Liz?
Can you hear me now? A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, it's just kind of quiet. Go ahead.
Oh, I put my comment in the chat. Okay, yeah. She said she put it in the chat.
Yep, she's in. She's like very inspirational. Reminds me of what John D. Liu did with the Los Plateau, which is super awesome. I want Jenny's cat to speak.
What is Jenny? Is
or
Jenny's cat?
Jenny, we can jump back to you since we missed you in the sequence.
Sorry, that was Marcus Aurelius. I know it's a really pompous name for a cat, but that is his name. For me, I'm sorry, I don't know if you passed to me or not. I'm a bit distracted because you just brought in a mouse and it's not dead and it's just run under the sofa. So yeah, I'm really curious about how we could increase place readiness in places that are really underprimed for a generation in this process. So yeah, curious about lots of things. Sorry, I am going to need to go and do the mouse. Okay.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll pass it forward for you to Paula.
Yay, Paula.
So good to see you.
Hi everybody, and hi Carrie. I don't know if you Carrie and I had an interaction last year in a course on regenerative finance. We were in the same team, so yeah, nice to see you here. Well, you sort of put me on the spot. I think I don't have the bandwidth for this specific initiative right now, but I'd love to be in the loop to see what's going on in Barichara. I'd also like to see the other initiatives here in Colombia. I'm in. If somebody said they're in Santa Marta, well, I'm in Barranquilla, a few hours away, so it would be nice to connect. Yeah, and I'd love to be on just in the loop and then see what future opportunities there are. But yeah, I don't know who to pass it to.
I believe Anne may be the only one who's left. Anne, are you able to come on?
Marie and
Marie and Hunter. Oh, that's a few more. Anne, maybe we'll go over to you.
Yeah.
If she's there. She said she couldn't come on video.
Oh.
Yeah, so who else hasn't gone? Hunter, have you gone? Maybe.
Marie?
Marie, no, Maurice said she's in.
Me. Oh, there's Amy.
Yeah. Yeah, Penny hasn't gone. Penny, how about we go to you?
No,
I have already spoken, so sorry.
Okay, we got you.
Just finished or not? Because I have to pick up my daughter here, just playing, so sorry. But you finished or not? Not yet.
Not quite.
Penny's gonna finish.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm totally gonna. I'm not. No. Yeah. No. I'm not in at all. No. Okay. Yes, I'm in.
Just if to leave or not? Sorry. Just leaving or not?
Yeah, no, we're gonna wrap up now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a lovely closing. Thank you, everyone. And so we'll see you all again in 2 weeks if you're able to make this time. You can always send me a message directly if you have ideas. And we'll think about how we might create some better structure to support this work too. What we'll do in the design school or how we'll go about it. but to be continued on that. Paula, we should talk soon about the Northern Andes Regeneration Fund and the network of territorial foundations. There's other levels, but we'll talk about that later. Lots
I'd
of
like
stuff
to speak
happening in
to you
Colombia.
about that too, Joe.
And
I
Tom
would
as
also
well.
like to- if you
Yeah,
connect that
we're
with-
about to bring some funding into it. It's about to get real.
And also we're forming a Spanish speaking group, Paula, if you want to be part of it.
In the
Saw
design.
that.
Yeah. So for now, though, thank you everyone for being here, for your attention. Let's just all germinate and percolate on this. And like I said, if you have any ideas or you want to talk more, just send me a message and we'll make some time. And otherwise, onward, and thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.